Good afternoon, all of you. I'm Nidhi Goyal, and I'm here to talk to you as a stand-up comedian, to share a little bit of my journey, to see, is comedy a serious business at all? Let me begin here by sharing a small story, an incident of my life, which eventually made into my stand-up comedy set. I was once, about 2 years ago, I was at an aqua training class where, there is a group class and people are exercising in water with an instructor, etc. And I was in this peculiar mood that day, feeling very sensual about the water around me, the breeze, etc. And I was in this zone. And a voice came close to me and said, "How do you come?" And I said, "Holy shit, I'm not going to tell her how I come. What kind of question is this? Obscene in a swimming pool?" And then I said, "Calm down. Maybe that's not what she's asking." It was a she, yes. I said, "Maybe that's not what she's asking." And I said, "Oh, auntie, do you mean how do I cut it short and I said, "I come alone." She said, "You come alone?" I really wanted to tell her, with the level of sex education that Indian men have, most Indian women come alone. But, I just answered her question. I reassured her that I come alone, I go alone, I travel alone. Why didn't I make that connection? Why was this mundane curiosity directed towards me? Why was this big question about how will she travel alone? It's because when we look at someone like me, when we look at someone who's disabled, we look at someone who can't see. We think that this is someone who can't speak, who can't hear, etc., etc. We somehow focus only on what that person cannot do. We reduce that person to their disability. And I started experiencing this from the age of 15. I was diagnosed with an incurable, irreversible eye disorder, which would render me blind. And that's when I learned that how conversations change and they shift, how perspectives alter, and how assumptions begin to kick in. Well, I started noticing some very interesting things. People would come to me and say, "You're blind? You can't see anything? You're sure?" As if it's like a state secret that I will keep. As if my sight is a state secret. They'd come and say, "You look so normal. You're really blind." When I would walk into parties, people would be greeting each other and saying, "Hello, hi, hey, cool to meet you after such a long time." And as soon as I would walk in, they would say, "Hi, Nidhi, you're my favorite." And I'd be like, "I'm 20, not 2. But it took me a while to deal with my blindness. It took me a while to understand these altered perceptions. The first 5-6 years, I was basically losing sight. And it was like being in a combination of a plateau and a slope. What did this plateau do? I could see X for a couple of days, and then the sight would decline. The most frustrating thing, and which I had to rapidly and constantly cope with, was, okay, fine, but how far will this plateau? How steep would be the decline? And when this happened, I developed this headspace to see how funny all these assumptions are. And I remember that someone came and told me, "You people who are blind and all, yeah, you guys have this sixth sense now." And I said, "What do you think my name is? Nidhi or Nidhi Mata?" And somebody came and was very hesitant. So they said, they didn't want to use the word disability. They said, "You have a problem?" And I turned around and said, "No, do you?" You have all these instances from your life, just pile them together, become a comic. And I said, "Okay, fine." And that's all it took me to take a leap from talking to my friends to performances. Okay. I made my debut in December 2015 in Calcutta, and I still remember that show. Because at the end of the show, there was this lady who came to me and who said, "Listen, I was falling off my seat laughing. But you know what? I was cringing at the same time. I was listening to you and I was thinking, oh my God, this is exactly what I think of people with disabilities. This is exactly how I behave. And how funny and stupid it is. But you made me question my behavior. You made me question my thinking to reflect on my actions." And I thought for me, that was the biggest motivation. That was the biggest the point that kept me going and made me decide that thing they don't know that I'm using their life instances to make jokes out of. But, to pool all these experiences and to talk about disability, to talk about gender, to talk about sexuality could bring a solid change. And that I would not give up on this tool for activism. I said that. We all say such things, right? And then in a couple of months, I got this opportunity to perform at a mainstream comedy club. Up until then, I was performing more at private invitations, at events, etc. I stay up till 3 a.m. I'm almost rattled. The first 2 minutes when I went on stage, people wouldn't react. There was this just a silence that you couldn't cut, you couldn't break, you couldn't penetrate. And it was annoying. I came back and I called a friend and I was chatting. I didn't let him sleep also till 3 a.m. It wasn't just me suffering alone. So I said, what is this? Why don't people just get it? Why can't they see me as a comedian? Why can't they go beyond the white cane? And why is the onus always on me? Why do I have to make them feel comfortable? And I paused. Suddenly something clicked in my head. And I said, wait, but isn't it the job of a stand-up comedian to make people uncomfortable? All I will do is that my content, not only my content, but also the mere fact that I'm occupying this space where you don't imagine someone disabled to be, will rattle people, will make them feel uncomfortable. For me as a disabled woman to point at the elephant of the room, to point at the stigma that people have around disability, would open up conversations. And I could use these unused space to voice an agenda or issues that are not advanced. And that's the point that I said, okay, fine. Step up again, go back, and make them more uncomfortable. But the point was when my video was launched, the invisibility of people with disabilities. I said, why don't we have disabled comics? Are we not creating an environment for them? Are we not letting them express? Are they not stepping up? Because the pressures around disability are so immense. The stigma around disability is so immense. The image that we've cast or created around people with disability is so immense. So my question started, why not a comic with a disability, right? And there was this one day that someone came up to me and said, you know, you're blind and you still crack jokes. That's so good. Another day someone came up to me and said, you must be having so many struggles in life, no? In spite of all these struggles, you can laugh. Hats off to you, yeah? And that's the day I thought, okay, the reason we can't see people with disabilities as comedians is because we somehow end up seeing disabled people as these pitiable objects of charity. Something like our good deed for the day. So it's like, hey, it's my birthday today, let's go to this blind school and feed 20 kids, right? Or we say, my God, we should count our prayers. Now, thank God, like we have like 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 hands that function, what we're talking about. Or this third kind of reaction which says, we should do some social work. Hey, let's help him cross the road, right? Because somehow the imagery of people with disabilities are like these poor, pitiable objects. And that's why the minute I'm on stage, some of the people are like, oh my God, oh shit, she's blind. Oh shit, what can she do? Can she walk? Can she talk? Will she need our help? And the whole discomfort starts spiraling up. Because we don't know what these people want. Because they are the others, right? We are uncomfortable around them. It's not so much about ignorance. It's not even so much about prejudice. It's about this huge sense of discomfort. It's about this whole attitude of othering. Because we don't know what they want, but we don't want to engage with them to know what we want. When we talk about bodies and sexuality, and there comes the whole thing. When you said LSD, I said, I talk about love, sex, desire. Now, the next layer kicked in because people were really upset. They said, first you want to talk about disability. You are a disabled person. Then you're a woman. Now you want to talk about all these controversial issues like love and sex and desire on stage? What shameless you are. I said, okay, I just have 2 stories to share. There was a blind friend of mine, a man. He married a blind woman. The first question that he got asked was, you're blind, which means you can't see, right? How will you know where to put? I don't even want to reply to that. But how come it's okay for us to ask immensely personal questions about bodies, about sexuality, just because people are disabled? And if those questions are valid, why can't the responses have space? I mean, I'm not saying those questions are valid, but I'm saying if you can give space for such questions, you have to give space to the responses. All we are doing, or all I am doing, is trying to remove this hush around sexuality. Is trying to talk about something that's constantly rolled under the carpet. And now as a woman, when I talk about sexuality, what really ends up happening? It's like, you're single at 32, that's such a big stigma. You should be married with like 3 kids. No, 2. Population control. So 2 kids. You should have had that, and you're talking about dating on stage. You're talking about I'm single at 32 on stage, and I'm like, sure. You can tell every woman what's the right age to get married, what's the right age to produce kids, what the right age is to form menopause also, right? But she can't talk about these things. And so the pressure continued to begin, or continue to perpetuate. My idea was that, and these feedbacks I got more after my shows. I remember very recently after a show, a man came up to me and he said, very good, very good. Enjoyed, madam, really enjoyed your show. You're very bold, huh? If a man talks about sex, he's being a man. If a woman talks about sex, she's bold, huh? Then he continued his compliments. He said, I must tell you correctly. Fantastic show, fantastic. You're very bold and you're very blunt. I said, wow, that was a compliment, sure. With a strong subtext of condescension. The idea is that what kinds of pressures are we putting on a woman who's disabled, who's a comic, to suppress her voice, to stop this kind of uncomfortable exchange. And my really real empowering moment was when I performed for the first time in Mumbai, and my parents came in. My parents said, we're all coming. Our whole family is coming for your show. I said, have you lost it? My father said, what happened? I've also circulated your text to my friends. I said, Dad, you're coming, your friends also coming. You want me to perform a freeze over there? He said, why are you overreacting? Stop being a drama queen. I know you work on disability, sexuality, gender. I'm like, that's nice, but obviously all of them came. And they enjoyed. And that empowered me even more. If my family can enjoy, if there are people who are saying this is an exercise we need, that this kind of comedy is an issue-based comedy with bringing change, I don't think anybody in the world can stop me from doing it. But people are very interesting because they say, now you shouldn't stop, you should stop introducing yourself as an activist. I said, why? They said, because now you're using comedy and that brings change, that's already activism. I said, no, comedy is a part of my activism. I really can't replace this with comedy. Why? Because as a woman with a disability, I'm very impatient and I'm intolerant. I'm intolerant towards things that ruin our lives, that ruin the lives of people with disabilities. Sure, I cannot crack jokes on a woman who's being forcefully sterilized. Her hysterectomy is being done without her consent because people want to prevent the pregnancy that may occur from rape. So it's okay for her to be raped, but better remove her uterus so then she can't conceive. I can't crack jokes, but I do want comedy to be a very active tool of my activism. Why? Because comedy can make us reflect. Comedy can make us question in a non-threatening way. Comedy can make us understand that, we can build ramps in auditoriums, we can have schools that are inclusive, we can provide accessible material, we can have quotas for employment. But if we don't treat people with disabilities as people first, we don't engage with them, then all of this doesn't matter. All of this comes to a point and goes to a standstill. I really say today that comedy brings change. And if many more comedians like this come together, who are people with disabilities, women with disabilities, and start challenging norms, start challenging prevalent ideas, society will change. The day the society changes so much that there is no prejudice floating around, that there is no stigma on being disabled or a woman with a disability, I'll run out of jobs because that would mean that the world is a much, much beautiful place for people with disabilities, particularly for women with disabilities. Thank you.